origins reading for a client named MJ. And MJ was super interested in me focusing on her soul mission and karma. So you might find that this reading is kind of geared towards that. So before I did this reading for MJ, I did a shamanic journey, and I always find that this information just adds a layer of confirmation to what I'm finding in the astrology chart. So MJ, when I did her journey, I saw a supernova. I saw an explosion at the end of a star's life, and I knew that was somehow significant for her path. I also saw some Jedi-like soldiers marching. We know when we talk about Star Wars, some people believe that that was channeled information actually coming from real life scenarios playing out in the galaxy. So I believe she had some sort of play in an ancient historical war in the galaxy. And I was also told during the journey to pay attention to her Mars placement, and especially how it is out of bounds. So I also wanted to pay attention to aspect patterns. For some reason, I was told to do that. I don't usually do that when I do a chart reading, but then when I searched her aspect patterns, I was amazed to see how many she does have. And considering that she wanted to focus on past life karma and for soul mission, I found it interesting that she has a yod, because a yod a lot of times is a karmic placement, something that you've been working on over many, many lifetimes that you're finally now here to heal, bring together, tie up loose ends. So it all fit perfectly together with exactly what she wanted me to do in the reading. Okay, so when I tapped into her karma left that she came to heal, like I always try to figure out why did this person come here? We come here to heal all sorts of karma. You know, we have past lives on Earth, we have current life karma, bloodline karma, collective Earth energy karma. We also have past lives on other planets and galactic collective. And one of the biggest parts that she came to heal was the galactic collective, and also past lives on other planets, and a tiny bit of stuff from the other categories. So when we're moving on into who she was, and how many lives she had on Earth, and how many of those lives were 3D versus like some of the higher etheric states, how many of those lives were galactic in comparison in 3D or higher states, I got that she was mainly a higher energy galactic being. She's been here on Earth, but compared to how many lives she's had out in the galaxy in higher etheric states, it does not compare. So she was here during Lumeria and pre-Lumeria, the time before Lumeria. I got that she does come from within our galaxy and our universe. She held both frequencies of individual and group. So she was like an individual 3D being, like we would consider ourselves to be, but she also had a more of collective frequencies, which would be obvious with the fact that she had so many higher etheric states. And that a lot of her time was spent in the Hyades constellation. We'll get to why. So as we go on, we're going to start with her first separation from source and what I perceive to be the supernova explosion. So we're starting with her very first separation. She was in the Hyades, and she decided to become the frequency or energy of a star in the Hyades. So just like we have our sun here burning, blazing bright, allowing us to live here on Earth, she was making it possible for life to start forming on other planets out near the Hyades. However, a star dies out, and that star can start to take on, at that time, and even before that, through parallel lives, other consciousnesses. So she was that super explosion star that was like to signify what I saw as her star died, and she chose to then incarnate into her next life, or the next significant life to this one, in the 2D animal kingdom, also in the Hyades, but I saw her as a cetacean. She was kind of coming through in this like one consciousness of a dolphin or a whale, and I was getting that she also has a lot of significant guidance from these spirit animals that are embodying the one group consciousness. So the message here for her was to embody elevated mind state that we are still all part of that one whole, and it's really hard to do, especially right now with the state that we're at in the world and the politics. But that's the best thing to do, to work on healing yourself and that polarity within you. So take a look at how some of the karma plays out from the Hyades. She has her moon in the 5th house of Virgo squaring the Hyades in the 1st house Gemini. As a Virgo moon, there can be a critical nature, and it's in the 5th house. So the 5th house wants to find creativity and joy, but that critical nature can sometimes hinder that ability. So there's a struggle with her between living fully in her joy in the present moment, and then that critical nature that the Virgo moon can carry. There could be some kind of karmic connection to the Hyades with the square to the moon and her emotional state. So it's almost like she wants to go home, or there's this regret that I was sensing from starting this journey. It's like, let's get back to that oneness that we know we are, but we are having a hard time doing that in this 3D state. But the important message here is in the sign of Gemini, where Hyades is in the 1st house. It's important to learn from so many different people and situations, and be the eternal student, always learning, always gathering, and always realizing that even your worst enemy can turn into a great learning and teaching experience for yourself. She also has Lilith conjunct the Hyades in the 1st house of Gemini. So she was born with this feeling like what she had to say wasn't important. She had a different view than her family or even her siblings or friends, and she was kind of, in a sense, a social outcast, walking this path with, as a witch. So she really has a hard time with speaking her mind and her truth and who she is without worrying ahead of time that other people are judging her. But what she has to realize is that as such an evolved, advanced soul, she's coming in with such high knowledge, and she's meant to speak that truth anyway, and find so much self-esteem and confidence within herself that it doesn't matter what other people think, and she should not be also assuming what they think going into the situation before she even speaks. And another karmic placement was that Saturn in the 7th house of Sagittarius opposes Hyades in the 1st house Gemini. So here we see another Hyades karmic placement, and this speaks to her limitations around relationships, which she expressed she has been struggling with. And there is, again, that need to love herself, express herself for who she is, and put it out there that she's confident in her own belief system, and she's not going to worry anymore about a potential partner rejecting her before she even shares some of this personal belief system with them. Her next step down is now in the constellation of Cassiopeia. So it is known that after the Lyran Wars, a lot of the Lyrans fled to other places and recolonized, and one of those places was Cassiopeia. I was getting that she was kind of an elemental mermaid being in the higher etheric state, followed by a reptilian. That was more like 4th density, and she did confirm that she was obsessed with mermaids, the Little Mermaid as a kid, and she did feel a connection to some of the reptilian beings, but she was really unsure because there's so much out there on the internet that is blowing that conspiracy way out of proportion. So the polarity was heavy after those refugees fled from Lyra. So people who were born there as a descendant of the original Lyrans, they really felt that polarity, and especially in Cassiopeia, they were there trying to embody the divine feminine. They even, it is said in some channel text that there was a female warrior queen society started, and that was an attempt to balance out the masculine energy that had been taking place. I think I saw her when I saw the Jedi, that she was a female Jedi soldier, and there was fighting in a war for her country, for her clan, her family, and she was so proud of who she was, but she also lost herself in that identity as this female warrior. So she does confirm that in her life she's a feminist, but she can see how her feminism has taken a masculine approach, where it's almost like so much power in the female energy that you're rejecting that other masculine part, but you're also becoming masculine in being overly a feminist. It's like taking the same masculine energy, and I think it was referred to by Lisa Royal Holt, you're wrapping it up in different wrapping paper, calling it feminism, but it's still masculine energy. So she's working on stepping more into allowing, receiving, flowing, and being okay with the idea of being more feminine. So the next part of her reading that I want to touch on is the nodal story. So she has her South Node in Scorpio in the sixth house. So when we're talking about the South Node, we're talking about the energy of something that your soul is ready to move away from. There's also a karmic attachment to relying too much on this way of being, because you've done it so many times, you feel comfortable reliving this way, and it often plays out in childhood where you act the same way, but sometime around your Saturn return, or even, you know, later in your 40s, you start to realize that this is not the way that is meant for me anymore. You're supposed to align more to your North Node, which is always on the opposite polarity axis. So sixth house, this is not our sixth house Scorpio. Scorpio is never a light placement when we're talking about the South Node. It involves heavy tragedy, but it's time for your soul to move away from being absorbed in this kind of darkness and heaviness. You are supposed to move away from the Scorpio intensity and move into the simplicity and comfort of Taurus. Getting back to basics, comfort, getting in touch with your body, the land, Mother Nature. In the sixth house, the South Node, you were swamped by your duties, your daily responsibilities. You could have been a war soldier, a servant, a slave. You could have been taking care of too many children and could never have any time for yourself. Perhaps you had a sick family member you had to care for. You had to sacrifice. With the North Node in the 12th house, you're now supposed to nourish your soul. You are supposed to recede into peace, harmony, and spiritual healing. Planets conjunct the South Node, Pluto. Pluto just confirms that Scorpio feeling of death. It could be war, we already know that. Invasion, loss of home, rape, horrifying tragedies, again, confirmed. I'm not saying that any single one of these things happened. We already know the War Jedi thing. I did see that, so I like to really, really go with that, but it could be a number of things. So then we look at the ruler of the South Node, and that is Mars in the 9th house of Capricorn. We're dealing with Mars. That, again, is embodiment of the typical war soldier. In Capricorn, there was a no-nonsense attitude. She was easily able to adapt to solitude, and she had a sense of self-denial. She was able to build strength due to facing relentless pressures and not being able to care for herself. She didn't have to care for herself. She had to worry about her duty, her mission, and she didn't have time to be emotional or get bogged down by her feelings. She had to cut herself off from that. So now this is the lifetime to soften, to shed tears, to come in touch with her emotions, to find her place, find her home, and her true place of just feeling comfortable. So in the 9th house, again, we're talking about the ruler of the South Node, what we want to move away from. She could have been really powerfully influenced by a strict religious or spiritual structure that was like forming why she felt the way she did and why she worked so hard and sacrificed herself. But at this point, that is no longer serving her. She's not supposed to be living under anyone else's religious or spiritual ideology. And if we relate it back to the fact that the South Node is opposite the fixed star in Cassiopeia, we know that this this time in Cassiopeia is relevant. So if we saw her as the female warrior, embodying that feminine energy and the warrior Jedi, we know that this mission to embody the divine feminine was this spiritual greatness that was kind of taking over her way of being, that she sacrificed herself for that. So we're moving away from that. We're moving away from having to sacrifice herself for someone else's religious or spiritual ideologies, even if they felt really comfortable to her at the time. And it is possible that they did, because when we move down into the soft aspects, the sextiles that she has in her chart to the south node. She has the south node sextiling the moon, which means she had a great love for her clan, her people, her nation, the group that she was conforming to. But at this point, she has to break free from that. She's supposed to break free from any limiting belief systems that tell her she has to stay and care for her family unnecessarily at the expense of her own freedom or what she knows she should be doing on a higher soul level. And also she has the south node sextiling Neptune. So this belief system that she had was uplifting, inspirational, but yet it was ungrounded and not realistic for where she's going. When we talk about her next step down, we're looking at Orion. So if you know the story of Orion, you have a lot of polarity. The Lyran Wars and the polarity that started at the beginning of time, since humans were developing and growing, we have all that polarity kind of playing out and being pushed to other places in the galaxy, Earth being one of those places. But Orion was known to be very heavily polarized, more so than we see here now on Earth. And you had three different groups really at play on the grounds. There was the Orion Empire that was suppressing people. You had the resistance fighters that were trying to fight that, and then you had the innocent victims that were just like, we're not involved in this, but we're being victimized. And then you also had some beings existing in the higher states, etheric states, who were kind of like the spirit guards or the guardians looking over that planetary field, and a lot of people would consider this the Council of Five. There were higher etheric beings that were kind of overseeing, but not too much getting involved. I believe that she had a connection to both two different lives here. I've sensed her as like being part of the Council of Five in that higher etheric state, but also on the grounds in 3D as like a spokesperson for this higher council. So she was there, but she wasn't really part of any of these three groups. And she was just trying to bring in some higher vibrational energy into this dark place. So we are then stepping down into some time in Antares. And I don't even know if it's a step down. I would just say it's either a parallel life, or we just call it the next stop that's relevant. She has Antares conjunct Saturn in the 7th house again. So we're dealing with some karma with Saturn, 7th house around relationships, and Sagittarius energy. So I sensed that she was here with her Antares frequency pre-Lemuria and in Lemuria on Earth. So this is where I think she was coming to Earth. And she was here to bring truth of the higher place, like Antares, to Earth. And it is also said in some channel materials that Antares is kind of overseeing and caring for what's happening here on Earth, and there are some higher dimensional beings that are here actually helping us in the higher etheric realms. So they were some of the first beings to come here during the Earth's inception, and Antares is also known as a stargate in the galactic world. It's a stargate to connect people out in the galaxy to higher realms. A lot of interdimensional travelers, and when I say interdimensional travelers, we're talking about people or beings who travel without spaceships. They have the ability to warp time and space and do all sorts of time travel with their minds, and that's what we're talking about here. So I do think she was coming here during those times. I see her as a mantis being, and I don't think you would see that as some evil insect being coming to take over or do harm. It's more of like, that's how I think we would see this energy as manifesting, even though it's not an actual insect. It's more of an energetic, the way these beings would show up to us energetically. So again, Saturn is conjunct Antares, and there's some karma, and also Antares and Saturn are opposite Chiron, so there is a double whammy here. And it also feels like at a soul level, there is, again, some regret for walking this path. Like she has come so far from where she started as that original high frequency star being. When I say star, I mean she was an actual star. Again, but it's important to remain flexible and to learn from others in relationships and remember why she came. And this is an entire learning experience, and she needs to remember that in order to spread light for others. I got a strong sense on our next stop. She shows up in Lyra, but I think Lyra was connected with Mars, but there is a deep connection to her Venus placement with Beta Centauri. So I see her around Lyra, and a lot of the stories go that some of the planets that were around in the Lyra constellation are no longer inhabited. It was said that there was wars there that kind of destroyed everything, and there are still beings kind of going back there and overseeing what's going on there. And I sensed her kind of out there just hanging around, almost like on a spiritual mission. I still sense that warrior energy, but it's not so much as in physical battle. It's more of a overseeing things, kind of like scientific exploration kind of energy. So I think that she's a being from Beta Centauri, but kind of hovering around somewhere out in a spaceship near Lyra, as crazy as it sounds. So her Mars placement is out of bounds, and whenever I see an out of bounds planet, I think that it really doesn't behave in a typical way that it would for the sign that it's in. However, she does see herself as being a typical Mars in Capricorn. So she is able to, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. She's able to have control of her own life. She's able to have high expectations for herself and feel really connected to like a long-term mission, and she doesn't need to back down from that. She can have the patience of Capricorn. She can do the little steps along the way to make great progress, and she is in it for the long haul. So she, again, we said it before, she does not mind waiting. She does not mind putting in the hard work, but she's not going to be completing someone else's mission. She kind of wants to be in charge of her own energy, her own goals. And we're talking about a long-term galactic goal here, something that she's been working on over many lives, and she's fine with that. Where I think the opposition or the out of bounds placement is showing up for her is that Mars representing the male partner that she would be attracted to, with the Mars out of bounds in Capricorn. She reports that although she is attracted to a more traditional type of partnership in a male partner, she also needs someone who is spiritually open to her more witchy spiritual views and practices, which is hard to find. So she is struggling there with that out of bounds Mars placement. So she's looking for someone who accepts her witchiness, but is also kind of traditional, which I can see why she's having problems with that, because that is hard to find. So if we move on to her yod, her aspect pattern, a yod, as I said before, represents a very special life mission. It can often be challenging, but holds potential for a large amount of spiritual evolution. Early life can seem chaotic, but the yod represents the time to bring the healing together and finally move on from whatever it is someone's working on. So in the yod, she has a sextile between the moon and Pluto. So this can allow her to feel emotional pain of others, make her very psychic, into astrology, and carry that embodiment of the psychologist. At the same time, though, she's supposed to be moving away from digging too deeply into other people's feelings, because her north node is in Taurus, her south node is in Scorpio. We're moving away from the other people's trauma. So she somehow wants to dig into this psychic astrological work without taking on the pain of others. So then we have the quincunxes in the yod. The moon and Mercury are in quincunx, and Pluto and Mercury. So both of these aspects speak to karmic readjustment. With the moon quincunx, she can read under the lines too much. Sometimes she's dissecting something more than it's important, than is necessary to do. So it's important not to hide her feelings, find a creative outlet, but she also might have a hard time trusting others because of these like deeper feelings of knowing how others operate way too much beyond what she needs to know. Like, it's kind of like other people's business and problems need to stay with them, and they're really not her business to get into. It doesn't do her any good anymore. So she needs to, in order to feel more connected with others, especially with the 11th house Mercury placement in Aries, that's the apex of the yod. She is supposed to focus on not being so suspicious of others, relating more with others, not being that typical argumentative Aries, Mercury in Aries that might come off too strong in her arguments with that Pluto connected to it. So just kind of like chilling, softening a little bit. The placement of Mercury at the apex is where her mission kind of comes through and what can be starting to be healed. And she also has Mercury opposite the supergalactic center in 2 degrees of Libra. So this talks to a balancing of relationships, being humble, diplomatic. It's good to remember we all come from the same source. We're all going through different expressions of that same source. So we're supposed to be learning from other people's different experiences instead of sticking so strong to our own views. It also speaks of mastering yourself, loving yourself, before you find love outside of yourself. And we're talking about the opposition between the 5th and the 11th house. So again, a need to balance a collective mission in the 11th house versus a more individual desire in the 5th house. And again, the way out, or the way to heal this placement is to focus on that 5th house. It's the area opposite Mercury in Aries. And that is going to be in the 5th house, finding your joy, your creativity, your passion, before you can really reach out to others in that Mercury Aries placement, which wants to connect to larger groups of people, speak truthfully and from a place of passion. It's really important to find your inner purpose, your inner sense of joy and leadership before doing that. All right, that's about it. I am so thankful for everybody who listened today, and I hope you gained something from this. If you want to look into booking a reading about your galactic origins, check me out, DLK